Both of my great-grandfathers have been a part of that study. My roots in environmental health come from my great-grandfathers. They were sharecroppers, and then later they were able to own land for their family for generations to come. My ancestors' connection to the land has given me a strong care for our environment and how that environment influences human health. I am a fierce advocate for equitable treatment for all. The ways in which COVID-19 ravaged Black communities showed that we have underlying vulnerabilities when something like a pandemic hits. The path from tragedy to triumph travels along the path of learning.
Industry was hurting, but I didn't bandage the rope. Now I got too sick with it. Now we done found us.
You know, I mean, here comes Monmouth, the defending champs. Now they come in at North Carolina A&T for homecoming.
Advice to Monmouth for homecoming at A&T.
You're giving advice to Monmouth?
Yes. Very much needed advice for Monmouth for homecoming at A&T. Leave the band at home. But at homecoming, you can just get the whole 20 minutes to A&T.
Hey, don't sleep. Monmouth has been practicing neck all summer.
Well, when we see Dr. Lee get out there on the field, we know something.
You can find our shows on Facebook at BCSN Sports Rap, YouTube at MyJBN Online, and everywhere you listen to podcasts like Anchor, Spotify, Google, and Apple Podcasts. You can also find the show on the Jericho Broadcast Network's app. Make sure to download. We look forward to you joining the conversation and being a part of the show.
You're looking for the latest information on Southern University sports, the Southwestern Athletic Conference, and HBCU athletics. There's only one place to go. Tune in to the Carlos Brown Show, exclusively on the Black College Sports Network.
Yeah. I love my HBCU, and boy, I love it, I love it, I love my HBCU, and man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah, man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with the hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
Good morning, this is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, as well as A.D. Drew. Charles Bishop is still hanging in on assignment. I think he may be celebrating a little bit. I saw him with a cigar. I'm sure he had a bottle of champagne as they were popping in for winning the trophy of the Orange Blossom Classic. You know, he was excited. I saw him beachside. So we'll see if we can wake him up from his slumber and get him on in here. But it's good to see everybody. Obviously got the lab lecture listeners in. Price, LaShawn, Harris, Ralph, Willie Mack, Reginald Johnson, Eric Lockett, Stan Hardy, Bill Russell, James Bryant, all in the lab as we get started. So with that, welcome to episode 175 of Inside the HBCU Sports Live radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the Sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports, from institutions large and small, from the NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture and HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live, as we always do, in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. And that's sending a signal live across the country. Really, let's say across the world as we do it. I've had emails from people everywhere in the house. See Charles Bishop sneaking in here as he gets ready to go. Let's welcome him in here. He's got his mute on, but he'll be ready in terms of what's going on there. Charles, it sounds like you had a late night. I saw you with your cigar, your victory cigar. We got that appropriate. Then, on our Sunday, we debuted our special segment. We brought in a little bit of champagne for those that win the classic trophies. Classic trophies are important around these parts of the HBCU sports culture. So we thought we'd make sure you celebrate. Unfortunately, Mike had me open one early yesterday morning.
This is what's left. This is what's left.
As he texted me about the show, but I made sure I left because it's my understanding it's appropriate to make sure that Charles, in terms of Bishop, has a chance to get a little bit of his champagne going.
Yeah,
we do have AD Drew on here,
and I ain't drinking nothing, fellas.
he has two teams that he can find a way to get a sip of the champagne, and it didn't work out either way. So
the only thing I can drink me is a bottle of water today because to take with the aspirin that I need to take, because not one but both my teams took an L on yesterday.
Yeah,
that's a rough Labor Day.
They could at least split it up to let me recover, but no, both of them had to play on Sunday.
Wow.
So today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THC Agency LLC. THC Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. Let's lay out the framework of the show today. The first half, these gentlemen were not with me as they were on assignments, making sure they could get in those Sunday games in a lot of ways, making around circles and taking care of business as they travel the gamut. So we'll do a little review so you can get their perspective on some of those key matchups that we talked about on Sunday. Then the second half of the show, we'll go into those Sunday games that we have not talked about thus far. So just wanted to break that down and get that into with you. So let's get it started. One of the games I really wanted to get into early, let's just jump in here. We have the Texas Southern Prairie View matchup, the Labor Day Classic, Texas style, if you would. You had the number 10 Panthers go on the road and dominate, at least in my opinion, their rival, Texas Southern, in that Labor Day Classic, 40-17. What are your thoughts on that matchup, Mike? What did you see going on?
Well, I was traveling, so I have this new cable program that allows me now to save stuff, and I watch it on both iPads now. So I was watching it, and there was a lot of banter going back and forth. But I thought Juwan Pass had a very great game. He had 354 yards total offense. The running back by committee that Prairie View has, there was a little concerning that they don't have one featured running back. But nevertheless, they had enough offense to really do the job. So hats off. But what really surprised me was, those transfers on the Prairie View side of the defense. They really did a good job of keeping TSU at bay. So very good output. I think Juwan Pass even added 30 yards on the ground along with Lindemann Brooks and Jaden Stewart. So they were running back by committee. You wonder if Prairie View's going to have a featured back, but other than that, a very good showing. Little wobbly passes from if you talk to some of the Prairie View alumni, but nevertheless, he got the job done. His first outings, he and Coach Dooley, they'll work on some of those kinks.
Yeah, I think you make some excellent points in terms of really being interesting in terms of what Dwan Pass would do. I mean, he was the question mark at the QB position. We know how those things work. And so when you saw him start early with the fumble, I thought that was fascinating. Especially it was inside the 5. The other question mark was the defense. You really didn't speak of the defense, but I want to see what Charles says, maybe not only in terms of his analysis on Dwan Pass, I'm sure he may have something to say there, but also what he thought about the defensive side of what Prairie View got done.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you take a look at the defensive side of Prairie View, those were where the question marks were because of the transfers who had left. But they afforded themselves well in this Labor Day Classic game, and you can't say his name enough, Dwan Pass, in terms of what he was done for Prairie View in this game, this huge Labor Day Classic game. And in some ways, it sets the stage for, expectations for Prairie View moving forward. That offense really looked like it was humming with him at the helm. And, one thing we always say about Eric Dooley, he knows how to put points up on the board. So
exactly.
And he has a trigger man. He has a trigger man that's really getting it done for the Panthers. So, we've talked about the SWAC West teams, Alcorn, Southern. But, now the dogfight, Grambling gets this out-of-conference victory. Huge for the SWAC. Gets this out-of-conference victory against Tennessee State. And then you got Prairie View. That's offense was really coming against Texas Southern. And, I look for a little bit more from Texas Southern because I thought they had some pieces on the defensive side of the ball that could get after the quarterback. So, that was a huge win for Prairie View.
Yep.
Great points made up my all. Let me go back to 80 Drew and see if there's any secondary points. I know he made a couple of them yesterday, but I do want to find out since he had another night to sleep on it and we continue to go over the data and the numbers and stuff like that. Anything else stood out on you that you didn't get to talk about yesterday?
Going back to that Labor Day Classic that you guys are talking about. Unfortunately, does not look like Texas Southern is going to be the UAPB of the spring. What I mean by that, UAPB came out of nowhere and was able to dominate the West. It took everybody by surprise. Texas Southern did not look like it was ready to take that and become the new UAPB.
Let me go back to you, Mike. This time, let's look at that matchup between the SIAC and the SWAC. State matchup, private, public matchup, Miles at the Division II level, Alabama State at the FCS1 Division I level. What were your thoughts in that matchup? Ultimately, you had the number 3 Miles Golden Bears in the mid-major poll lose a overtime game due to an extra point that was blocked to Alabama State, who got the victory, needed victory. They were dominating most of the game defensively in a lot of ways. Miles showed up too. Couldn't get quite things going on the offensive side. What did you see in that matchup? Mike?
Yes.
Let me go to you, Charles. What are you thought of that matchup?
Yeah, what was the matchup again, Dr.?
That was the Alabama State Miles matchup.
Oh yeah, tremendous matchup when you talk about the SIAC versus the SWAC. And one of the things that I looked at with this game with Miles and Alabama State, we knew Miles was going to be offensively challenged, but they have an SIAC preseason defensive player of the year in Smiley. And I was a little bit surprised that Alabama State wasn't able to do more things offensively because I was looking for more things from Ezra Gray and Ryan Nettles. Now that they've had, a spring together. But, defensively, Alabama State is who they are as advertised. Corey Clark in the middle, tough linebackers, tremendous secondary, and they held down Miles. But I tell you what, to get that win over an SIAC opponent, you need all those out-of-conference check marks, Dr. Bill. We always say that all the time. So kudos to Alabama State for getting the win over a tough and pedigree program in Miles College.
AD Drew is shaking his head, so it sounds like he might have something to say. He wasn't too happy. What are your thoughts?
Alabama State is who we thought they were. And most people think they are not good. They are not good. At least at this one data point, as Michael likes to say, we need more data points. At this one data point, they are not good. Open up just like the MEAC SWAC Challenge. Alabama State drove straight down the field, scored that first touchdown. Matter of fact, when they scored that touchdown, I was in the elevator and on my way up to the press box. So I missed that because there was no more action for 3.5 quarters. Alabama State could not get it together. From the turnovers to no one, either team was able to put together a drive with more than 2 first downs in order to put themselves in the position to win.
I think in some ways, game one of a lot of games that I watched this past week, some teams just didn't have that offensive rhythm that you love to watch and have.
Outside of Alabama A&M, South Carolina State, no team seems like they had the offensive rhythm.
And some of that is, game one. Some of that is you going against a stout, fundamentally sound defense. So that's why I take my hat off to Miles, because we knew Reginald Ruff was going to have this team prepared to play a SWAC team, as most of these SIAC teams are. They come in with that chip on the shoulder, much like we see MEAC teams now with that chip on the shoulder playing these SWAC teams. But I was expecting a close game, but not that close. I was still expecting Alabama State to get the W, but a little bit of that is just honestly my SWAC arrogance, and I have to be able to try to check that, at times, because you take a look at who the SWAC has, you take a look at the personnel on paper, and just because you're not as familiar with, the personnel on the SIAC side, sometimes you tend to discount, what they're playing with. But it's quality ball being played in that conference, and we've seen it with Miles. They are a pedigree program, 4 conference championships in the past 5 years. So the outcome shouldn't be that totally unexpected.
But great point. Let's take a pin in that, and let's take a break as we get into the end of this first quarter, and we'll get into that second quarter, and then we're going to pivot and talk about some of the Sunday games, because I know Charles got to make some moves, and then we'll get Mike back in here. This is Dr. Cavil inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Stick with us. We'll go into our first quarter break, and we'll be right back for the second quarter. It's just getting hot and heavy. We're going to go into some of the Sunday matchups, and then we'll come back and revisit in the second half of the show some of the other matchups with that. So stick with us. We'll be right back after this quick break.
So let's get back to strolling instead of scrolling. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts on COVID-19 vaccines. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision for yourself and for your fam.
It's the show where we take you inside the game before the game begins. It's the pregame. With your host, Charles Bishop and Neely. So get ready, because we pregame harder than the other show's party. It's the pregame.
Since 2002, Empowerment Resources, Inc., a nonprofit organization, has empowered more than 1,500 youth and adults in Duval and surrounding counties through its programs Journey into Womanhood, Girls Mentoring, Life Skills for Teens, and Parenting Education Coaching. To get involved with programs, volunteer, or donate, visit www.empowermentresourcesinc.org. Follow us on social media, facebook.com/empowerment.resources and instagram.com/empowermentjax.
Support the Black College Sports Network so we can continue to provide you coverage. Go to myjbn.com/support and be a part of the Black College Sports
Tell everybody
Network.
they can follow their dreams.
Back. This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We have AD on the giving us some sideline reporting and doing the production on the backside, as they say it. You know, they got that new word they use, the field analyst. So we gonna juice it up a little bit. Our analysts over there, giving us all that side note. We're gonna get into some of the Sunday games because I know a lot of folks have interest in that. Before that, there's one game that I did want to make sure I got both of your opinions on. That was a big game. It was a top 10 matchup with South Carolina State coming in at number 6, traveling to the number 1 team, at least in preseason polls. And we'll see what that looks like on Tuesday because the new poll is coming out. Also, get ready for the HBCU Pro Sports Media, as its poll will be released this week as well after week 0, after they did the preseason poll last week. So that'll be the first one coming back out after week 1, all the action. It'll be fascinating to see what the media, HBCU media, thinks in terms of the poll. And then, you know, I love Dr. Cavil's data points, and Mike really loves to talk about my poll. Charles, AD Drew actually gets into action sometimes as that analyst as he does, you know, the show analyst, I'm gonna call him, because, you know, he is the hardest working man in the HBCU sports streaming business. With that being said, let me stick with you, Charles, since we ended off on that data point. South Carolina State, Alabama A&M, man, fascinating matchup. Literally went down to the end. I know there were some other folks that want to look at other teams that go to Celebration Bowl, but by definition, this could have been a preview to the Celebration Bowl with Alabama A&M. Many people have them coming out of the SWAC. Also, South Carolina State, preseason number 1. Many people have them coming out of MEAC. This is one of those games, although it was not on the various networks, it was streamed from Alabama A&M. It lived up to it. What were your thoughts in terms of Alabama A&M and the South Carolina State? The Bulldogs had dogfight for real.
Oh man, this was one of the more fascinating games to watch, and I was curious because it could very well be a Celebration Bowl preview. When you take a look at South Carolina State being picked to finish first in the MEAC, and Alabama A&M defending Black College national champ from the spring. But I tell you what, Corey Fields and Shaq Davis for South Carolina State, that's a tough duo to deal with. But Aquill Glass, I mean, you can't say enough about him. I don't have the stats here in front of me, but I think he passed over 400 yards in this game.
426, 4 touchdowns.
Yeah, and that's carving up a tradition-rich South Carolina State defense.
That's true.
You know, that stood out. And, you know, I was moving around and doing a lot of stuff, of course, in Jackson State yesterday, but I was able to catch a little bit of the game. And after the first 2 series with Alabama A&M and South Carolina State, I called South Carolina State's defense. I said, this is going to be interesting. They're getting after him. They're getting after him pretty good. And then I looked up and I saw 3 touchdowns, and I was like, oh, Aquill slipped in Aquill mode. So, you know, they found their groove. They found their footing. And, you know, you take a look at Aquill and his receivers. They've had at least a minimum of 3 years of experience with each other. And that chemistry is just beautiful to sit back and watch them throw the ball around all over the place. But, you know, that's a data point. That's a heck of a win over a tough South Carolina State team, a team that you expect to be right there in the mix toward the end of the year.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating. We'll get a chance to talk about the Orange Blossom Classic that featured Jackson State and Alabama A&M. And it was the total opposite side of that type of game because it was a defensive matchup. I only bring that up because we'll go in more detail as I go to each of you all. But sticking with you, Charles, what are your early thoughts after one data point? We know it's just one data point. I love Mike bringing that up there. One data point, right? Mm-hmm. You know, Jackson State in that South Carolina State, in that Alabama A&M matchup for homecoming is going to be fascinating especially after one data point, defensive side of Jackson State, obviously, and the offensive side of Alabama A&M. It's going to be interesting to see what that looks like. Just kind of wanted to put that chug out there. Any early thoughts on that, Charles?
Yeah, that game had a very interesting ebb and flow to it. And I was talking a little bit earlier about the nuances of watching a football game and trying to watch offenses get into some sort of tempo. And you just take your hat off to both defenses yesterday because they were flying around all over the place and they were sticking yesterday. I think Shiloh Sanders had some ooh-ah moments yesterday. You also had Marquise Bell. He had some ooh-ah moments yesterday. Just watching the safeties fly around from hash to hash and coming up and filling in on the run. That was phenomenal to watch. If you're a football head, if you're a person who likes to watch good defense, the way both teams' defensive line really got after it yesterday, the linebackers filling holes, that was a true defensive ball game. And it was very tough. I'm talking to offense coordinator from Jackson State, very tough to get into some sort of rhythm yesterday. And when I think both teams found some rhythm, you take your hat off again to the defense. A turnover from Shedeur Sanders. I think that really stymied Jackson State in terms of what they were able to do yesterday, because when they got some things moving, a turnover happened. When Florida A&M got some things moving, you might have had a penalty, false start or whatever. So, they were playing behind the chains. And just take your hat off to the defenses yesterday. They made each offense earn everything they got. And it was just a true struggle to get some sort of flow to that game yesterday.
I love some of the points you're making there. I want to go to Mike first. Alabama A&M, South Carolina State, the top 10 matchup. And then we can go to the second top 10 matchup with Jackson State. Let me know your thoughts on Alabama A&M, South Carolina State.
Oh, well, man, we expected, I think CB alluded to, South Carolina State to be a defensive team. I did not expect this much, offensive output from South Carolina State. And Corey Fields, tip your hat to the guy. He had a good game. It's just that, and you look at this game, it's over 1,000 yards of total offense. And 426 yards total passing for Alabama A&M. Despite leading in the turnover game, they found their stride. And Akil Glass, once again, is as advertised. 28 of 49. I think CB alluded to that. 426 yards, 4 TDs. But the one takeaway or the one data point that I'd have you leave is we talked about in the spring that receiving core for Alabama A&M between Brian Jenkins, Abraham, and Allaire. Between the two, they had 350, 400 yards of receiving. So you wonder how this team is going to do against a defensive juggernaut. You saw the revamped Jackson State defense flying all over the place, as CB alluded to. How will they fare against them? How would they fare if they, ended up paying a FAMU? We know that the offense is clicking now. They don't see after the first quarter. I don't think they lost a step. And by the way, they had a 100-yard rusher in the name of Gary Quarles, 22 carries for 129 yards. So they came in as advertised in South Carolina State. Corey Fields, he was the leading rusher and the leading passer. So both teams played well. It's just that Alabama A&M has a lot of offensive firepower. So they're going to be tough. A lot of folks picked them to not only come out of the East, but to come out of the SWAC. And this is one data point. That's a really good data point. They look good.
Yeah, we would say so early. I love that. A really good data point. We got to add that to the lexicon. With that being said, I'm going to go to AD Drew. One thing that's interesting, a lot of people are picking on Alabama's defense, but if you really go in and look at that game, 21 points scored by South Carolina State. Give them credit. They scored the touchdowns, but they were short fields on turnovers. You talk about Brian Jenkins. His first time touching the ball was on a punt where he fumbled the ball on the punt, setting him up for a short score by South Carolina State, where when they picked up the ball, they were already in the red zone. Similar to what you've seen with Prairie View and Texas Southern. Prairie View's defense, which I hadn't seen happen back since you're talking about the Purple Haze defense. Let me bring up this name to you all. Y'all, you might remember this. Heiss Northern, when he was the defensive coordinator of their top 5 FCS defense that could stop teams on a quick turnover like that. I hadn't seen that from Prairie View since then, so it's fascinating. Not to rehash that, but really what I wanted you to talk about, AD Drew, is what are your thoughts on that FAMU Jackson State matchup as you've seen it yesterday?
I just want to get this one point on this the Alabama A&M game. Greatest game no one saw, because it was not easy to find that game, and it arguably was the best game of the weekend. I won't say the best, but it had the most action of the weekend with 80 points scored in that particular game. So, you know, I just hope.
And it had a little bit of everything too. You're right.
Yeah, it had a little bit of everything. Last point on this: how many teams is Alabama A&M going to be able to just outscore?
Right.
They've got to be able to tighten up their defense now.
Yeah, but I want to push back on that a little bit because, as I said, that's why I was interested in get your take on it since you're going there. Is 21 points off turnovers. I mean,
but the opportunity.
So that means you had, in terms of length of field, because I also like to see what teams can go to length of the field. I love what Charles Bishop said when you're in there. When you really go in and start watching the games, there's things that you start to really look at when you look at the nuance. You know, how do you see one team's offensive line? Who's controlling it? And when you talk about that Jackson State FAMU game, you know, a lot of people are going to say, hey, I'm not scared of either one of these offenses. Obviously, with FAMU, there may be some questions at the quarterback position. But once they found a little rhythm, you saw that go down. But I also would say, talking about Mike, a data point, how much of that was the defensive schematic, obviously by the players that Jackson State was able to do, that didn't allow them to get in the rhythm? Can everybody copy that? Every team in this league is not going to be able to copy exactly what Jackson State did without leaving some gaps open. So every game has this nuance, and I love that we talk about these data points because I'm interesting, because I think we get this in some of these, sometimes we get in these trite framework. Alabama A&M's defense, Alabama A&M defense, certainly it's not one of the top and not going to be a top defense, but can you argue yesterday how much of that was credit to South Carolina State really being a stronger offense than we usually traditionally see them as?
Yep.
Versus how much of that was the fact that Alabama A&M's defense is very poor. I think we'll be able to see that over some data points and maybe get that. And maybe you're right. Maybe it was different. It'll be fascinating to see. But with that, as we start to get in this second half, I know we got to go. I did want you to finish up and really give some insight on that FAMU Jackson State game.
I only had a chance to watch the first half of the game on my iPad before I had to go prepare for the radio broadcast for the Tuskegee Fort Valley State game.
I will say this for you: it stuck the script. So if you saw the first half, you saw basically the first.
Yeah, and I haven't had time to go back and watch the rest of the game. But FAMU could I figure it out on offense what the heck Jackson State was doing to them from a defensive standpoint. They they had some exotic blitzes and different things that they ran at the FAMU quarterbacks and were able to confuse the heck out of them. Now, the starter Rashawn McKay was thinking and dunking.
Yep.
Like Coach Simmons said, he has the arm strength. And I'm having a moment because I got too many names in my head. Help me out with the second quarterback, Charles, who came in from FAMU.
Maratovic.
Junior Maratovic had the arm talent and was able to do a few things, but still could not get that final punch that he needed because of the Jackson State defense. Now, we want to find out how good Aquil Glass would be at the next level. That's what that homecoming matchup is going to be.
Yeah.
Because he will be playing a defense that will be running NFL concepts. If he has success against that type of defense, he may be a day 2 draft pick.
Agreed.
Let me say this, AD, and this is just being embedded in Jackson State practice. That defense was very well prepared. Dennis Thurman called a tremendous game against Florida A&M. There was no personnel, no set that was not seen. When I say they were scouted very well, I think that contributed tremendously to Jackson State really clamping down on Florida A&M's offense. When I started kind of taking a look at this game, they were able to really do some things that they just could not do in the spring. You mentioned
you can't get that insight anywhere else except for Charles, as he is getting to really get an inside look at the Jackson State program. So check out the pregame show because you continue to get insight like that throughout the week. Let me let Mike jump back in here as I know he wanted to get a bit. Then Drew, you can quickly say something. Then we're going to end up going to break. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, CB, I know you were there, and like AD, I only got a chance to see maybe most of the first half because I was in airports. At 3 yards per pass for FAMU, 3 yards per pass the whole game. That's what they averaged. And I think it was like 3 yards per rush. Was there a commitment to stop? Obviously both, because it looked like JSU just won the battle in the trenches, from my perspective.
From talking to defensive line coach Jeff Weeks, they expect the Florida A&M to try to get that running game going. So first and foremost, there was a commitment to stop the run. Yeah, it's kind of cliche, but you want to make teams one-dimensional. And from that, once they sort of made them one-dimensional, they were able to do quite a few things. They were able to show blitzes. They were able to come. They were able to really cat and mouse once they had stopped the run. And I think those were some of the things that I started to notice with regards to the game, that, Florida A&M was not able to get their running game off the ground, and it was a full-out commitment to stop Florida A&M's rushing attack.
Wow. This reminds me of the FAMU Grambling State game where both teams came in with a lot of offense that was in the Circuit City Classic, and the defense really controlled the tempo of the game, and you had maybe one big play that allowed Grambling to win the game like 12-9 or something, really low-scoring game. One of the things I've seen in this matchup, as you talked about, is Willie Simmons and FAMU really likes to get the ball out in the flat, tends to get it out quickly, and they picked up on that. And they decided, like you said, let's commit to this run. They will try to open it up. They flashed in the middle and really stacked up everything. And you could tell that the Florida A&M offensive line was not really ready to see them come in that attack mode. So they were always trying to figure out who is the blitzer. And they just would miss folks. It was young people trying to learn the game on the fly. And I don't think we understand that these young men are not professionals, not only in terms of their skill set, but their time availability to practice things over and over. They don't have that type of time. So when something is changed on the fly, it becomes much more of a challenge. And so they were prepared to try to go maybe a little deeper. And then when they got them behind the chains, and you need to have a, 5, 6, 7 step drop to allow a receiver to run a route to get to the chains. By definition, if I can get to the quarterback faster than I can allow them to run the rope, game is basically over. And that's what they did. We'll take our chances. Every once in a while, FAMU would make a play. But in terms of traveling the length of field, that is a challenge to get done. And that's what I saw in that matchup. I know, AD Drew, you wanted to get something in. Please quickly get it in so we take this one.
My quick thought is going to be, Jackson State had 4 months to prepare for FAMU. Especially now, school is in, when you have the 20 hours of contact that coaches have per week according to NCAA rules. How quickly can Jackson State turn those concepts over to prepare for different opponents week to week to week? That's what's going to be the test of how good this Jackson State team can be.
I also want to be interested to see about that offense, because that offense is going to improve. We saw some highlights.
If they get into
in regards to, especially in the second half of the game, I thought part of it was because FAMU defense was just getting tired. Let's give credit to the defense of what FAMU did. As much as we may have had some concerns with the offense of FAMU, their defense stood the test too and went toe-to-toe with Jackson State defense in terms of keeping them in that game. But it'll be fascinating. Both of these offenses will get better. I mean, you got solid players on that side of the ball. You got talent. They just played up against the juggernaut for week 1, so it'll be fascinating in a lot of ways to see what both these offenses will do the rest of the year. But again, this is chess. This is a chess match. Matchups mean everything. offensive plays, and I love what you're talking about, AD Drew. You know, how does that look week to week as you try to look at a team, find out a schematic? Sometimes you're going to find some jewels, and sometimes young men, you're going to fall on your face, and it'll be interesting to see, because I think the last thing I'll talk about is the SWAC is relatively deep with talented teams on at least one side of the ball, which will give some teams fit. So let's go into this break. Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop, AD Drew. I hope the lab listeners are really enjoying a lot of the comments that are going in here. I see that you're flushing it out as we give you some breakdowns on what we see. Type in your comments as we get going and see, do you agree with some of the things we're saying? Do you have some other points? We'll be right back after this quick break. Did you want to say something real quick, Charles?
Yeah, one quick telling stat to tell you how much of a defensive struggle it was. Jackson State only 3 of 14 on third downs. Florida A&M only 5 of 17 on third downs. Jackson State only averaged 2.3 yards per rush. Florida A&M only 3.5 yards per rush. So it was just a defensive dogfight, if you will, just a good old-fashioned defensive dogfight.
No doubt about it. Great analogy. And I saw some of the stuff where you were going back in a lot of your comments. Your interview with the legendary quarterback at Jackson State University with FAMU, went up there in that 1978 semifinals, which many people thought was the de facto championship game of the first 1AA championship. Now the FCS is what they call it. And you're right, it took you back to some of those ironclad defensive units from both of these teams. Fascinating in so many ways. Let's get out of here. Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Let's take this quick break. We'll be right back on the other side, the second half of the show.
Thank you guys for what you do for HBCU athletics. This is a fantastic avenue for all of us. This is our ESPN, so we love what you guys do. Brian, AD, Roy, all you guys at BCSN. We really appreciate what it is that you guys do for us.
Your ad could be ran here. MyJBN.com/support. MyJBN.com/support for more information.
Can I get the now bar, please? $1. Have a good one. Got it.
Hey, what's going on?
Hey.
Let me get a now bar.
Sure. $1.
Appreciate you.
Got it.
This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. Charles Bishop had to get on assignment. He's checkout time. You remember old Tupac had that one. I love it in hotels. You got to go. You might not have to go home, but you got to get out of here. Yeah, they got to get prepared to catch that flight and get back to the real life as he was out there with his foots in the sand. Yeah, he was doing a little work. But if you know anything about Charles Bishop, he knows how to have some fun too, especially after they find a way to get a victory. Yeah, you know he's doing his thing. With that being said, let me jump back in here. I want to get into this nightcapper, if you would, which was the Fort Valley State Wildcats at Tuskegee Golden Tigers. Fort Valley Wildcats finally got the victory over Tuskegee because they own them last. But you talking about doing it in style, man? They really took the task to Tuskegee. I'm gonna stick with you, AD Drew, because I know you wanted to talk in multiple facets. Yesterday we had the tit for tat a little bit with BJ Jones talking about Coach Slater talking to herself about the AD getting on the phone, and I think she said there may be inter ego, somebody else he may need to alter ego. I should say somebody else he need to talk to. What you got?
I think there needs to be there's going to be a roundtable discussion. It may be today on the holiday. We got to meet today to figure this out between Willie Slater, the quarterback coach, Willie Slater, the offensive coordinator, Willie Slater, the head coach, and Willie Slater, the athletic director, are going to have a roundtable today. And each one of them is going to say, hey, you guys to help me out here because you're not making me look good. And this is the conversation that the alumni that I was talking to as I was leaving the stadium was saying. So the alumni recognize that it's all right. Coach Kevin Powell's defense played tremendous despite that score. That defense was given short fields so many times. It just finally, the dam finally broke. That's the best thing that I could say, because I guarantee there were 4 or 5 times in that game where Fort Valley picked up the ball on the plus side of the field there. Now, both teams turned the ball over. But speaking of defense, Fort Valley's defense is going to be a force to be reckoned with. Well, way too early data point. Is Fort Valley's defense that good, or was Tuskegee's offense that bad? We'll put it like this, because Tuskegee, until the last drive of the game, had negative rushing yards. They wound up the game with, that's not for the fourth quarter, that's how many total rushing yards they had for the game. 4 rushing yards for the entire game on approximately 20 rushes. And Fort Valley defense, they stopped Tuskegee so close to the goal line, if the center sneezes, the ball is in the end zone. That's how close Fort Valley defense came with that goal line stand.
Man, great. 4. He said it's not fourth quarter. That's 4 yards. Mike, what are your thoughts in terms of Fort Valley and Tuskegee? I love it. Great one.
Man, you say that this may or may not be a data point. I did watch at least the last half of this game last night. Remember a couple of weeks ago, we were talking about your poll. You had Fort Valley at number 6. And what did Mike say? Mike said Fort Valley.
No, Fort Valley was not in the poll.
No, I didn't have Fort Valley. That's
Albany State was number 6.
I didn't have Fort Valley in the poll.
I thought they were number 6.
To your point, Mike.
I thought they were number 6. I'll go back. But I said, remember, Fort Valley has beaten Miles 3 of the last 5.
You did say that.
I did say that. I said
you said they should be in the poll.
Yes. But this defense was flying around. I think it's a combination of both, to your point, AD, that Tuskegee, they couldn't get out of their own way. They were flying. I think they're 2, and the names escape me. 2, they had a linebacker and a safety between them. They had about 8 sacks. I mean, seriously. So they were flying around the ball. Tuskegee could do nothing. They scored 21 points in the third quarter, and then they it seemed like they kind of let up a little bit, but Tuskegee was helping them out. You mentioned the short turnovers in the wrong field, but Fort Valley, give them credit. That defense looks every bit of the part.
And speaking of that defense, I saw a play in that game that I probably have not seen since like little league football, when you got like an 11 to 12-year-old team, and one team is full of 11-year-olds, the other team is full of 12-year-olds, but they got to play in the same league. I saw a strip 6 for a touchdown, a 60-yard touchdown. Yep. Not a fumble 6, not a pick 6. Reach in, snatch the ball from the running back, and run the other direction. A strip 6 for a touchdown, 60-some-odd yards. You do not see that too often in college, in football, period.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, that was wild. Karen Griffin says the TU Nation is in shock. Yeah, that gets back to the need for the roundtable for all things Slater. I love it. Yeah. With that being said,
and I love Coach Slater. I love Coach Slater. Coach Slater is the epitome of what of Tuskegee and
This is not to jump on him in that way, but you're right. This is not going in the right direction. But if anybody can change it, it's going to be Coach Slater. He needs to get that done. Let's take this quick last break. Dr. Bill's inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watch Charles Bishop. We're going to get back in and talk about the Tennessee State Grambling Tigers game, the last Sunday game. Then we'll have some wild cards in terms of games from Saturday that we haven't talked about that we'll see if anybody wants to get in there and really break down. With that being said, stick with us. We'll be right back. Our last break as we get into the fourth quarter. This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watch and Charles Bishop. Guesting coming in here, providing us some thoughts as AD Drew.
Let's get back to getting ticks instead of watching flicks. Before we can safely get out there, we need the facts on COVID-19 vaccines. Visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision for yourself and for your crew.
This is the BCSN Pod Zone, your place for the news, views, and conversations about all things related to HBCU athletics. Here are the BCSN Sports Wrap, Dr. Cavil's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab, Knights of the Round Table, the pregame show, the Carlos Brown Show, the ONG Strike Zone, and more in one place. We are changing the way you consume HBCU sports, one broadcast at a time.
Your ad could be ran here. MyJBN.com/support. MyJBN.com/support for more information.
This is Dr. Bill inside the HBCU Sports Lab. One of the last Sunday games we'll talk about is one that really focused on championship pedigree, the blue bloods, the black bloods, red, black, and green bloods, if you would, of HBCU football. Grambling State, Tennessee State, the Tigers were in a cat fight, defensive cat fight, similar to what we talked about with Rattlers and Jackson State. This one, I don't know how much was just the defense or a little ineptitude on the offense. Tennessee State ended up playing three quarterbacks. Jeremy Hickbottom got in there and had some actions. 8 for 10, 65 yards, 6.5 carries. Tucker Pope did a little better, 1 of 2, 31 yards, 15.5. And then they had Devion Bryant. That was 4 of 12, 22 for 1.8. So they were combined 13 of 24, 118 yards, 4.9. Grambling had Elijah Walker. They played the whole game. He was just 4-11, 43 yards. Rushing game, but it wasn't like they just had a lot of rushing yards, and it was done by a combined effort. Tennessee State rushed for 112 yards, while Grambling rushed for 141 yards. So nothing offensively to stick your hat on, but defensively, it was a intriguing matchup. Came down. Grambling did what they had to do. They were able to run out the clock and make some great defensive plays, especially late in that game, as it looked like Tennessee State maybe was trying to drive to see if they could make a last stance and rip the victory out of the hands of Grambling State Tigers. But big one, as we talked about some questions from the coaching staff over there. Big win from Grambling any way you look at it. Mike, what are your thoughts on this game?
Yeah, big win. You mentioned the rushing attack. Tennessee outgained Grambling 230 to 184. But the problem is you can't win when you commit 18 penalties for 150 yards. That can come back and bite you. I mean, you know, and then you talk about the quarterbacks. I understand quarterback by committee, but this is a whole conference of quarterbacks. They got Jeremy Hickbottom and Bryant. Oh my gosh! So you wonder what going forward from a consistency. Who's going to get the nod? Is it going to be Hickbottom or is it not? So but that one data point of the 150 yards and penalties. That's a key stat. They also went 3 for 13, not as efficient as Grambling, which was 6 for 13, almost 50%. So not as efficient with the offense. So both teams were almost equal in time of possession, but you just kind of wonder. It's a good win for Grambling. Their defense played solid when it had to. So kudos to Grambling on this win.
Yeah, great point. As I shift and take it to AD, Grambling ruined the debut coaching of Eddie George. And then sometimes when you see his face on the sideline, he's like, man, what did I get myself into? Because he offensively, he was quite frustrated. What are your thoughts on this game here?
Let's look at some positives for Tennessee State in this game.
Okay.
They won time of possession. Great rushing attack. Trying to find a third fella.
I know. I was wondering what's going to be next.
I said that's fine. Some. I didn't say 8. Some is more than 1. So we found some. But yes, you are right. Tennessee State is going to have to. We at least got to get down to 2. You can have one play 80 to 90% of the snaps and bring in another quarterback for a change of pace. That's fine. But yes, you was literally changing the tires out on the field on this past on yesterday. And I'm just going off different media reports. I have not had a chance to really lay my eyes on this game and break this game down. But Grambling broke a 6-game losing streak. Very important for the Graham fam. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
That's sigh of relief from the Graham Tigers Nation. So maybe we talk about data point. Maybe the spring was an outlier for Grambling. Yeah, maybe they get back to what they need to do. And we traditionally under 5s, Grambling has been a second half team in as far as the SWAC. We've seen Grambling with 1 win, and then at the end of October, 1st of November, they're in contention for the SWAC title. One last thing, I believe that is also a 6-game losing streak on neutral sites. I got to find the number again, but I believe they broke a 6-game neutral site losing streak, and we know what the most famous neutral site for them is.
Yeah, you have the Celebration Bowl loss, but the other one that people quietly don't realize is the number of games lost he's lost in the State Fair Classic.
Okay.
Which is a number of those, is probably about 3 of those 6 in the State Fair Classic.
I have one more point with that one. Maybe a data point for preparation. I don't know if it was just this game, but Grambling only attempted 11 passes, but 45 runs. Was the focus to run for this game, or are there concerns with the passing game? I don't know. But that's a data point for future consideration, is that their offense was one-sided, seemingly. Maybe this was for Tennessee. They looked at the film and said, hey, we can rush these guys. They do have a committee of rushers. Their 3 receivers each had 1 reception. So 4 for 11 attempts, but 45 carries. So they obviously we're going to do this on the ground, but, you wonder, will you see more of that passing game coming from Grambling in future games?
Can I chime back on that quickly?
Yes.
Maybe Grambling figured something out that a lot of these other coaches should have figured out.
Right.
Coming off of this layoff, coming off of everything else, your offenses are not going to be clicking at the rate that we are used to seeing. Fans want to see October, November football. It's the first weekend in September. Maybe more coaches should have taken, let's hand the ball off to the running back. Let's go back to a traditional set, because we see our teams have success running the ball. And as soon as you pop off 3-4 consecutive runs in a row, they go back to dinking and dunking and trying to throw the ball. And the time is off.
Yeah.
So credit to Grambling for realizing it and actually staying with the script.
Yeah.
Let me get these comments out here.
I just wonder.
Says, AD for Grambling to be better second half team I am watching now. It needs to get a whole lot better. Bill Russell said, "Well, I take a Tennessee State team I saw yesterday than the one by Rod Reed Tennessee State team I saw in 2019. Eddie George will have the Tigers winning soon. It'll be interesting to see just how soon that is. I'm not sure." Richard Burton says, "Just win, baby." I like that one. That's true. At the end of the day, that win-loss column is extremely important. He said Mike is like, nah, not so fast. With that, before we go to a close, I did want to get in there and send some love. There was a team that just cannot get the love. They did exactly what they were supposed to. And that's one of the reasons probably why we're not talking about it. And Mike, your uncle/dad, will be excited about us doing the proper due diligence we should. Arkansas Times, he used to call it Arkansas A&M. They beat up on Lane Dragons 34-16, workmanlike process. They got it done in many ways. Lane, to their credit, was able to put up 290 yards. Tarek McKenzie showed well. To be interested to see if they can translate that into SIAC. He did have 247 yards, 8.2, 17 of 30 in terms of his pass, catch, and attempts. 2 touchdowns, did have 1 interception. Skylar Perry continues to do what he needs to do. 18 of 31, 189 yards, 6.1, had a touchdown. In terms of rushing, though, Pine Bluff, 275 yards and 2 touchdowns. They did what AD Drew just talked about. They said, that's fine. Our offense will come along, we're moving slowly, but you know what we're going to do? We're going to run the ball. And they ran it down Lane's throats, to their credit. Fascinating when you talk about that matchup. Anything quickly that y'all wanted to say? We'll stick with you, Mike, in terms of this matchup.
Yeah, big Earl. I don't know if you know AG, but he played ball at UAPB with LC Greenwood or whatever, and he really, he lets me know that every time. So I still think that their offense is more. It was a workmanlike game. That was an appropriate description. But even though they had the number of rushing attempts, 44. They still had 33 passing attempts, so their offense was more balanced. Prairie View's offense more balanced. Grambling, not so balanced. So when you play Prairie View and UAPB, you can't just do the run. You're gonna have to shift. You're gonna have to balance your offense a little bit. That's my point. I don't give me that first game jitters. These teams had time to prepare. Yes, you're going to come out the blocks a little stumbly. There's going to be some kinks even in the passing game, but your offense has to be more balanced. So.
Fascinating. Any thoughts from you, AD Drew? Final
couple
thoughts.
small school shout outs I want to get out here. SIAC action versus CIAA. Clark defeated Livingstone.
Yes. I'm glad you brought up the Clark 10.
So it's just always interesting when you see these cross divisional games. SIAC, CIAA, MEAC, SWAC, just for conference bragging rights. Good job to Clark. Also, another small school shout out to Bluefield State.
Yep.
First time playing in 41 years. They only lost by a score of 21-14. Now, I don't know anything about their opponent. Haven't had a chance, haven't found any film on the game. They lost to Lawrence Tech 21-14. But the fact that you're able to put together a first-year team and see what they we saw before the Memorial looked like last year, putting together a brand new team. So kudos to Bluefield State for going out and not winning, but at least competing in their first game in 41 years.
Yeah. Well said. We'll leave it right there. What do you have, Mike?
Oh, yeah. Since we're giving out shout outs, shout out to Delaware State. They beat Bowie convincingly. Bowie State. Most of us had picked Bowie State to come out. Hey, they're going to reload at Bowie State. Delaware State played a tremendous game from quarter to quarter. So shout out to Delaware State.
And Hampton found a way to pull away from Union because Union was giving them fits.
Yes. Great ones when you talk about some of those matchups. I'm going to give one last shout out myself. Langston getting it done in a conference game over Oklahoma Panhandle State. Langston just finds a way to continue to win. 10-7, kudos to Langston. Just being a consistent mid-major program that finds a way to get it done. They're out there towards the west, and so they don't always get all the love they should, especially being in the NIA. But we're going to make sure that we give them the appropriate love they get because they're playing some tremendous football consistently over the years. With that, that'll do it for us today. Hope you enjoyed our Monday special edition on this Labor Day weekend to give you some insight of what took place over the weekend, particularly those Sunday matchups. This is the crew, Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. So thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, from inside the lab in the College of HBCU Sports with Mike Watson and Charles Bishop, with our guests, as we just brought in some framework. Special guest is A.D. Drew. He brings it like none other. We hope you enjoyed the interview as we just get it done in so many different ways. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Cavill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Watson and Charles Bishop. You know, get to us every Tuesday and Thursday. So we'll be right back here tomorrow at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time, as well as Thursday, then back to our regular lineup on Sundays at 9 o'clock a.m. We look forward to next week as we discuss the latest in the lab. Look out for the polls that'll be coming out. Look out for the polls. Debut tomorrow's Thursday show. And I'm going to sneak in another update on the poll on Thursday. Then we have the poll coming out from HBCU Pro Sports. AD, when is that poll coming out?
Hopefully it'll be out this evening. It's everybody's got a shorter voting window because of the Sunday game. So hopefully everybody gets their votes in time so that we can release the poll either this evening or early tomorrow.
No problem. Great point. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. That's DrKenyattacavil. That's Dr. Kenyatta Cavil. Inside HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. That's Inside the Sports Lab. Make sure you check out our lineup on my BCSN, my JBN, so you can get all of it. You can also catch us in podcast form. That's Dr. Cavil Inside, Carlos Brown, Knights of the Round Table, Brian A.D. of Sports Rap, ONG, BJ Jones. So many different shows that you can catch up with weekly. Check this out in terms of what you can find up and down the lineup. Just go to my JBN, my BCSN, and you'll find a couple of more out there that are coming soon and that they added. Now I might have jumped over one or two, but want to make sure that you find out. That's what we got for you. Remember ONG as well. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. AD.
Of course.
Mike.
Lecture.
Dismiss.
Finally got it right. Look at him.
Oh,